House hacking is the best way to reduce or even eliminate your mortgage costs, all while building wealth through real estate. Today, I'm going to teach you how to run numbers on a house hack in your market. I'm an agent and a house hacker here in Raleigh, North Carolina. If you're interested in our market, I can certainly help you here, but this is going to work everywhere. It is so crucial to any house hack that you run the numbers before making an offer, before getting attached to the property. So let's go over the process from start to finish, and by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to do. Now, I've talked about this in other videos, but there's many types of house hacking depending on your income goals and your comfort level, where you're at in life, what lifestyle you want. So get clear about what type of house hacking you want to do. If you need help fleshing that out, put a comment down below. Today we're using Redfin. You can use Zillow, whatever app you like to use. And when you start off, we're just looking at, your county, your city, whatever that may be. In our case, Wake County, which covers all of Raleigh, North Carolina, and then some. So we're looking at 3,300 homes. Most of those are not going to work for you. So we really need to flush out the homes. The less, the better, so we can get really specific. So then we can feel confident about what we're looking at. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about beds and baths here, because generally the ROI is better the more beds you have. If you buy a 4, 5, 6 bedroom house, it's generally going to be closer to that cash flow that you want than if you have a 2 or 3 bedroom. So in this case, let's say we're looking for a 4 bedroom with at least 2 bathrooms. We'd like maybe 3, so people aren't fighting over baths, but let's start with that. So that just eliminated the amount of homes in half, so now we have about 1,500, which is still way too much to comb through. Most of those are still not going to work. The very next thing that I would do is I would go ahead and I would eliminate other types of housing. So I'm only looking for a detached house. Some people have house hack townhomes, some people have house hack condos. What I will say about townhomes and condos is that they have HOAs. A lot of single family houses do too. And personally, I'm going to end up eliminating HOAs as well. We'll get into that in a minute. But townhouses and condos tend to have stricter HOAs that eliminate rentals altogether, or say they have to have at least 6-month leases. You have to turn those leases into HOA. So it really limits what you can do. There's some other obvious ones we can throw in there just to get a little more specific. Obviously, we don't want 55 and up communities unless that's what you're doing. Garage spots don't really matter that much. Most of these filters on here we're not going to mess with. If you were specifically looking for a walkout basement, kind of turn it into a duplex, so to say, which is what we're doing here on the property, then you could look for properties with a basement. We'll get into that later. We can also search for keywords. You could search for basement. You could search for detached garage. You could search for ADU, mother-in-law suite, guest house, all these kind of things that might pop up, just depending on what type of house hacking you're going for. And like I said, I like to look for no HOA properties. It just relieves a lot of headache in regards to HOA, opens up a lot of options. So I'm going to look for no HOA properties, and that automatically brought us down to 662 homes. So we're getting a lot closer. Now you'll notice that the first 2 properties on here are both new construction. They're rendered models. I happen to know that unless it's a tear down, at least in our market, pretty much every new construction without a doubt has an HOA. They just might not be set up yet. It might not have made its way into the listing. So what we're going to go ahead and do is go to the year belt and make sure that it's no newer than, let's just say 2022. And that's actually going to bring us down to 160 homes. So we just got rid of about 450, give or take, new construction listings that weren't even going to work for us in the first place. This is a much more manageable list of homes to go through. Now we can get into location. So I wanted to point out that if you're looking for something super specific, then you need to forget about location and first focus on where are the homes that I'm looking for even located at. In our market, if you want multifamily, you have to go where the multifamily is, because there's only a handful at a time. And now location is highly dependent on your location, your market. I don't know your market, but I do know Raleigh like the back of my hand. So kind of zooming in on the map here, I know that based on where I work, based on appreciation and growth and high rent rates, I know where I want to be. I want to be relatively close to this area right here, because that is where the airport is. That is central to Raleigh and Durham. It's right by Research Triangle Park, which is a major business research hub for a bunch of workers, a lot of professionals over here. It's a great spot for a short-term rental and just for young professionals who are the kind of people who probably want to do a house hack anyways, whether they're short term or long term. So I want to be somewhere in northwest Raleigh, maybe north of the airport up here by Bethesda, potentially even down in Cary because I just know that's a hot spot in our market. But I also know that Cary tends to be a little overpriced because people love it so much. I'm probably going to get it outbid by families who really have a lot of income and they're okay with overspending on a house to live there. So I'm actually probably going to stay clear of that area, even though it's really nice. I know I can get better bang for my buck up here in the north, still get really good appreciation, really good rent because of my location. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the draw button here. Every website has these. And I'm going to kind of just highlight, let's just do this kind of funky shape right here. I've gone ahead and I've listed it from lowest to highest, and the cheapest homes that we can find right now in this general area is $440. So right off the bat, that tells me, well, 4 bedrooms for almost $500K, that might not be a situation where I'm making the best ROI on my money. Now, when it comes to location criteria in general, if you find that you're not finding the right houses, you might have gone too specific and then you can widen it. So something interesting happened when I expanded my search location-wise. We opened up some more homes, but the prices, as far as the lowest price, is still about the same. So we don't actually get anything closer to that 400 mark that we'd like to be at for 4 bedrooms. So in that case, then I might try going up to 5 bedrooms and see if that gives us a little more options. If we can spend a little bit more for 5, it might be worth it. But when we do that, we eliminate most of our options, and the lowest price we're seeing is about $630. I know for my market, that'll be really hard to make work. So the next thing I do is I'd go back down to 3 bedrooms. I see a detached house for $330, 3 bed, 2 bath. It's not a bad price at all. Seeing an older looking home here for $350. Same thing here. So when we went down to 3 bedrooms, we did start to get some properties in the threes, which is nice to see. We have quite a few over in this east side, which is typical for our market. I do happen to know that this area has older houses. I bought an older house, not in that area, but I bought an older house, so I'm not against putting in some work. Depends on your strategy. You could rent quicker and have something turnkey, but you'll pay a premium for it, or maybe you get something that needs some work. You could get some sweat equity in there and then, rent it for higher. So that's pretty cool too. This is kind of similar to the property that I got, honestly. $349, split level house, so you could turn it into, great backyard. You could turn it into a multi-level home where you live in the bottom and rent out the top, or completely separate them, which is what I'm doing here at my house. And it comes with a pool, which honestly will do great for Airbnb. So I actually really like this one. Looking at the location, it's not the best area by any means, but it's still in North Raleigh, which is a great place to be in, and it's worth checking out. So we're gonna roll in here. First thing I'm gonna look at is the square footage. Is it enough? With 3 bedrooms, 2 bath, $1,595 is good. I'd say anything above $1,300 for a 3-2 is good enough to rent out. You don't need a massive place. There'll be a lot of wasted space. You don't need 2 living rooms. All that stuff is nice, but you don't need it. It's pointing out that it's 15 minutes from downtown, 10 minutes to North Hills, which is a great shopping center for us. So these are important things to know on our end. So we're going to scroll down here to the location on the map and kind of dig into the area. If you're not familiar with the area, then this is definitely something you need to do. So the first thing I'm noticing is we are very close to Capitol Boulevard, which is a main road in our city, and it can get pretty busy, a lot of traffic and everything. Personally, I don't like to be too close to busy roads, interstates. A lot of people feel that way. If they're short-term rentals, they won't care as much as if, compared to if they were living there. But it's just something to keep in mind, even for resale value. We have a nearby Walmart for some shopping, next to a Lowe's and a Chick-fil-A. So there are some nearby amenities that people might like. Again, you're off of a main road, so that's expected. Next thing I would do is I would click on the Street View button here. This is going to give you a much better idea of what the specific neighborhood looks like. There's a lot of parts of our city, other cities, where it's changes street by street. You want to make sure that you have a real good understanding of what's going on in that street, especially if you're looking from a distance, or you don't want to waste your time and go out to a property just to be like, oh, I don't like it. I don't like the vibe. So we can see we're on a cul-de-sac. We didn't necessarily know that. I mean, it was probably in the description, but we didn't know that right off the top of our heads. We can take a look at how the neighbors take care of their properties. So, I mean, all the houses here kind of look the same. They look older and outdated, a little antique-ish, which again, like I said, might not matter depending on what you're trying to do. We're also looking at parking. So it looks like most of these homes, none of these homes have garages. They all have single car driveways. They have a double car driveway that they created. So when it comes to parking, depending on how many bedrooms you have, let's say 3, you need at least 3 parking spaces. So maybe you park in the driveway and then your guests have to park on the street. And don't just look right where the house is. I like to walk around as if I'm driving the areas. Moving deeper into the neighborhood, we're just seeing a lot of the same homes. They all look a little old, but there's actually not that many cars parked in the street. I don't see anything super alarming. We're not straight across from a pawn shop or anything crazy like that. So it just gives me confidence that we're just looking at an older neighborhood, which is very true for the area. What I like about Redfin is they provide some insights into the specific neighborhood you're looking at. So this is Atlantic neighborhood where the median list price is $357. Super on par with what we're looking at. Homes sit on market for about a month. So if you see a house that's on there for 2 or 3 weeks, maybe you don't have as much of a chance of getting a deal as you thought. Maybe homes are sitting longer here than they are in other parts of our city. It looks like not a lot of homes are sold, so they don't have a lot of data to go off of, but it says that they're selling for 3% higher than they list them for. So that just gives us a little bit of feedback into what's going on in this part of Raleigh. I like the payment calculators. They're simple to use. You can search based off of monthly payment, but I don't think that feature really works too well. So typically with house hacking, the beauty is you're living in it yourself, so you can put down 3.5%, which is great if you don't have a lot of cash or you're looking to do a renovation, which is what I did. So I put 3.5% down and then I put a bunch of money into the renovation instead. So based on that, the payment on this house would be about $2,800, but it depends on where rates are. They have it at 7.44%. I got mine at 6.75 just a little bit ago, 4 months ago. It changes a lot, so make sure you kind of weigh that in. Are rates going up, are rates going down? Weigh that into the numbers that you're running. Understand that they might change. Now, once you really get to know your area, these numbers right here should tell you very quickly whether it's worth exploring more or whether this property is just not going to work at all. At the beginning, you might run every single property you look at in the calculator that we're about to go over. That's totally okay. It's going to take a little bit of time and practice running your numbers so that you don't have to go to the calculator every single time you see something. You can kind of do some pre-vetting in your brain real quick so you don't waste time. Now, one of the perks of being an agent, I was able to go into the MLS and dig up a floor plan because in the property details and the pictures, they tend to not leave floor plans. They sometimes don't even tell you at all in the description what level each thing is on. So if you have 2 levels or a split level, you might want to know, especially if the floor plan's important to you like it is to me, okay, well, how many bedrooms are on the top floor? How many's on the bottom floor? Is there a walkout? All that kind of stuff. They leave those details out, which is baffling to me, but we got to figure this out. So I was able to pull up the floor plans for this house, and here's what we have. We walk in, we have a living room, we have a dining and kitchen area, and then you can go up or down. So at that point, you could go up and you would find the owner's suite, you would find the other 2 bedrooms as well. But if you go down, you would find a second family room, an office, and a bathroom. This is exactly what we are looking for because we just found essentially a 4, even 5 bedroom house. Now, it's not 4 or 5 bedrooms on paper, but we can see right away how it could be split off that way. At the very least, you could turn the bottom half into its own suite for you to live in or to rent out, and then they would just access the kitchen. Now, if you're super creative like me, I added a second kitchen to my house. You could easily add that here in the family room, tie into the plumbing from the bathroom or the kitchen that way, and have a completely separate space with a walkout entrance. That's an option. But the point is you have multiple ways to work this so that now instead of running numbers based off of 3 bedrooms where it probably wasn't going to pan out or it wasn't going to look great, now this could actually be closer to a home run. There are opportunities like this everywhere. I have literally been looking for a few minutes and we found this almost right off the bat. Now let's go run our numbers and see if it's as good of a deal as we think it is. We are now inside of the house hacking calculator that I've created. Now this was created for my own personal use. I share it with clients and I'm sharing it with you today. Of course, I invite you to download it for free and use it to your benefit. Change it however you want, and if you find a way to make it simpler, definitely let me know. Send me your revised copy, and maybe I'll start using it and sharing it with people. Really appreciate that. But let's get into it. So this is the main hub that we are going to be running our numbers in. There's some information in this first column here that isn't essential to running the numbers. That's something we might add on later on if we're going to share this with somebody else. But for right now, we're going to start with step one, trying to make it easy to follow. We need to know the purchase price. Now this home was listed for $349,900. We have not run comps yet, and I will show you how to do that. For now, we're gonna assume that we're giving asking price. Very market dependent, very comps dependent. But we're gonna do $349,000, all right? So we're offering $349,000. We're doing a down payment of 3.5%, and I put a column here for rehab. Now this is an older property. My property is an older property. There's gonna be some work that need to be done. Even on newer properties, there's just things that need to be done. For right now, we're gonna assume zero rehab just so we can focus on the house itself. So once you filled out the purchase price and the down payment, we're gonna head to step two, and this is where you enter in interest rates. Again, it's fluctuating a lot. Right now, we're gonna assume 7.5, understanding that it can change. And then also, the best thing you can do is get the property that works now and then refinance later when rates drop, and then you get your cash flow. Or if you're already cash flowing, heck yeah, you're cash flowing a lot more. We're gonna assume 30 years, that's your typical loan, and then, don't worry about the start date. You can always change that later. And then we're heading into the income statement. So this is actually where we get into the nitty-gritty, and I've made some assumptions that I've listed up here based on my market. You can kind of mirror those, but really, it really depends on your market. Get with a local real estate agent there. If you want a connection, be sure to reach out to the number below, whether you're in Raleigh or somewhere else, and I can get you connected to somebody. But super important that you do research on your specific market. Now, we are editing all the texts that are in blue. So what this page needs from us is it needs whether we're doing rent by the room, Airbnb, or both. Yes, both. You can have hybrids. If you're doing Airbnb, it's going to need your average nightly rent. It's going to need the number of rooms that you're renting and the occupancy rate, aka how often it gets rented. If you have 2 bedrooms and one's always rented, that's 50%. And then cleaning fees, which with Airbnb are typically absorbed by the buyer. We still include them. Sometimes you can actually make a little bit of profit off of cleaning fees for the inconvenience of having to book cleaners and everything, but that's a nuance we can get into later. Now, if you're doing rent by the room, just needs to know how much you're charging per month, how many bedrooms, and again, that occupancy rate. There is no such thing as 100% occupancy. You're going to have some turnover. Airbnb will have more turnover, and by the room, hopefully, will have less turnover, but maybe less monthly rent. Based on the strategy you're using, you're going to update the expenses. Yeah, it's a business, there's expenses. So you may have supplies needed like coffee and toilet paper and whatnot, and then the cleaning fee listed in Airbnb. And then they will be taking a 3% advertising fee. That is what Airbnb charges. Vrbo may be different. And based on where you live, there's usually an occupancy tax rate that you have to pay as well. That depends on your market. If you are renting, now regardless of if you use Airbnb or not, there are some other expenses that go with your property. Now remember, on the payment calculator, it actually estimated homeowners insurance, property taxes, and mortgage insurance, which is what you pay if you put down less than 20%, which we're talking about putting down 3.5%. We are going to take those numbers and we are going to put them in here. So insurance was $137. Utilities, that's dependent on your market, but typically for a larger house, it might be closer to $400, $500. For a smaller house, it might be closer to $200 or $300. So let's just start off with $250. For property taxes, it was $157. Property taxes are relatively lower in our market. And then we have mortgage insurance, that's $210. Now, because you're putting down 3.5%, it's gonna automatically calculate that for you. It might be off, a few dollars, but we have that listed right here. Finally, if there is an HOA, which I like to avoid, then you would put that fee there as well, but this one does not have an HOA, so we are good. And every property, new or old, is going to need some maintenance repairs. Eventually, if you own it long enough, you'll need to replace a roof or an HVAC system. But if you do all that stuff at the beginning or find a newer house, then your maintenance is going to be a lot lower, and maybe you can make this closer to 1, 2, or 3%. Just make sure you're being conservative. You don't want to think you're profitable and then get blindsided by all these repairs and big things that come up that you just didn't expect. Now, what this calculator is going to do is it's going to take your income that you've created, it's going to subtract those expenses, which is that number here, and then it's going to subtract your mortgage insurance, which is automatically calculated, that mortgage insurance we talked about, and then depreciation. You can depreciate your property over 27.5 years of ownership. That is calculated here as well. And so what we are left with is a final number. Now, we haven't actually filled out the rent section to what's realistic, so these aren't realistic numbers. I just want you to understand the flow of the calculator. So the question is, how do we have confidence in our nightly rate, in our occupancy rate, so we can actually get a realistic number? Well, it depends on your strategy. If you are doing Airbnb, then I would recommend that you go to AirDNA, which is an amazing platform which analyzes Airbnb data for your market. So in this case, we can actually enter in an address. Now, there are a lot of features and data that come with their paid subscription, but you can run this general analysis for free. And if you're really serious about getting into it, I would recommend getting a paid account for your market. I believe it's based on certain sectors or even zip codes of your market, but you can do a lot with the free version. So if you're on a budget or just not confident about it yet, then you can start here. So I put in the property address, it pulled up the photo. We know we're talking about the same place. Now, keep in mind that AirDNA is assuming you're renting the whole place. Doesn't have a good way of estimating per bedroom, even though that's a big thing on Airbnb to rent out individual bedrooms. So you have to do a little guesswork. It can get a little tricky, but we know that we could live in the bottom half, have our own living room even, and then rent out the top half. So if it's going to get about $157 a night, we can probably divide that by 3, add a little bit of cushion, and that would be our nightly average rate. So instead of $157 a night for 3 bedrooms, each bedroom might be able to get about $60 a night, which will give us $180 a night, and that projected revenue would go up above $30,000. Now, I happen to know in my market that's super realistic, but make sure you dive into the numbers by going through Bigger Pockets and reading through forums, talking with your agent, and going on Airbnb and actually looking at individual room listings, and that's honestly the best way to get a really good idea of what your home should go for. So now that we are informed with some data, we can actually run our numbers. Let's say for right now that you are Airbnb-ing the 3 individual rooms upstairs. So we have 3 bedrooms, each one going for about $60 a night. Now, I said I would talk about renovations. If we do some work on this property, we do some paint, we do some new flooring, we get it looking more nice and modern, we might be able to get a higher rate because the inside photos are going to attract that premium price. However, if you have long-term rentals, they're going to see the outside of the property, they're going to see the area, and that area might just not justify whatever you're trying to get for it that's a little on the higher end. So you just have to keep that in mind. I left the occupancy rate here at 70%. Now, I know plenty of people whose occupancy rate is significantly higher, but they're in hotter parts of the area. That's assuming that at any given point, about 2 of the 3 bedrooms are rented out, which is very, very reasonable. And what's nice about renting out individual bedrooms is that it's not 100% or 0%. Whole house rented or it's not rented. You actually have 3 different separate chances at getting it rented, so your occupancy rate should be a little stronger. Just make sure that you've said yes for Airbnb and no for rent by the room, and that's how we get this $49,990 right here, basically 50 grand, which is excellent. Now that's great, but what if I want to actually rent by the room, no Airbnb, long-term rental, medium-term rental? Well, let's figure out how to run those numbers. This is roomster.com, rooms for rent, and this is something that you may very well use to rent out your own property. So it makes perfect sense that we would check out the website or the app and see what other people are getting, just like we did with Airbnb. So in this case, I would head to Raleigh, North Carolina, I would look for a bedroom, and they're going to show us what they've got. So they have 110 rooms for rent right now in the Raleigh area. I prefer to be as close to where I'm renting as possible, so we know that we're kind of over here on this side of the map. Right here is pretty close. We'd like to get as close to our property as possible to really have that confidence. But look at this property. It's a 1-story, looks a little older. I see another bedroom for $700 a month. And honestly, the photos don't even look that good. Here's another bedroom. This one looks nice and updated, but not staged at $700 a month. Let's talk about that real quick. If you choose to stage your home, this works really well for Airbnb or medium-term rentals where they're there for 1 month at a time. A lot of traveling nurses, a lot of people traveling who expect there's already a bed, there's already a dresser, you've done all that work for them. They can actually move into a home temporarily. If they're long-term renters, then of course, yeah, just give them a blank room. That's fine. Otherwise, you'll get a lot higher rates doing the furnishing. I can show you how to do that more affordably if you want. Put that down in the comments below. Say, hey, I'd love to learn, because that is something that I've had to do on multiple properties, and I've gotten pretty good at doing it on a budget. It doesn't have to be super expensive. I know people who have spent $25,000 furnishing an Airbnb. Don't suggest that. I can show you how to do it much more affordably. But she's getting $700 a month for an empty room. We've seen a lot of 900s. This gives me confidence that my numbers that I gave you earlier, about $800, are very fair. It's an older property, but it's going to be furnished. So it might be able to get a little bit more than $800, but we're going to stay conservative on this one. So we are going to update this to $800 a night, 3 bedrooms, and I chose 70%. Again, that's assuming 2 out of 3 are booked at any given time. I think that's pretty conservative. So using rent by the room on a monthly basis comes to around $20,000. Do I think you could do a little better, closer to $25,000? Yes, but clearly Airbnb is going to pay a lot more. Do I think it's going to get $50,000? Well, I thought we were being conservative, but seeing how big of a spread that is, I might be inclined to say, hey, the property's a lot older, it's not as great of a location, and starting off, our rate isn't going to be as good as once we're an experienced host and have a lot of reviews. So we might be closer in that first year to $35,000, $40,000. Still, it's going to be higher than by the room, which is why I'm such a big fan of it. But we might want to adjust that and make sure we're being as conservative as possible. I'm still going to go for the Airbnb every time. That's how we're going to run the numbers. So to finally answer the question of whether this property is a good deal or not to house hack, well, we head back to the overview page, and this is going to give us a breakdown of everything we just did. So we know that it's going to cost us $22,000 between fees and down payment. That's the cash we have to bring to close. Okay, so we got that. The next thing we're going to look at is the market rent cost. How much does it cost to rent an apartment or a house in your market? For me, an apartment would be like $1,500. A house would be $2,000. So as long as I'm doing better than that, then this house hacking thing was a win. Now it shows that our monthly cash flow is $525. That would be incredible. And that's based off of the Airbnb data. But like we talked about, it might not be that way in the beginning, and we don't want to be too aggressive with our numbers and then get stuck with our pants down. So for the sake of being conservative, I'm going to lower that occupancy rate to 50%. We're going to assume that only 50% of the time a room is rented, but we're still getting 60 a night. I think 60 a night is a good value proposition based on my market. And with that one little change, we are now losing $500 a month. Nope. I want you to reword that. We are paying $500 a month to live in a house that is getting its loan paid down by other tenants. It's appreciating. I think that's awesome. If rates drop at all, then you're already back to break even probably. And as long as your rents get better over time, you're going to cash flow eventually anyways. When you move out, it's going to cash flow because guess what? There's going to be 4 bedrooms to rent. Now we're cash flowing $350 a month. And it's upside from there. So we're beating rent by $976 even though we're losing $500 a month. That's a really great way to look at it. And what's really exciting is that in the first year, you're paying off $3,100 of your loan. Now in the beginning of owning a house, it's not a lot. That number will be a lot higher on a year-by-year basis the longer you own the home. But $3,000 is $3,000 and your tenants paid it off, not you. This second side of the page is move out projections. We kind of just did that by adding a bedroom. You could also add the numbers here and quickly get a look at it. You should have right now all the tools that you need to run your numbers on a property. And then you just got to decide what's a deal to me. For me, personally, in my market, as long as I'm beating rent, that is okay. Even if I was matching rent or slightly above it, I'm still owning a house where I can appreciate, or I'm still paying down the loan. And remember, cash flow is not everything. To some people it is, and you can just live in a bedroom or in a living room and rent all the bedrooms and cash flow immediately. Great. If you want to do that, great. But if you're married, you value privacy, you don't want to ever see your tenants, so maybe you want a detached separate house, you're not going to cash flow doing that, not for a long time. But everything requires sacrifices. You're either sacrificing cash flow for your lifestyle or your lifestyle for cash flow. Just understand the nature of that relationship and use it to get the best outcome for you and your goals. So now we can finally answer the question, is this property worthy of making an offer in? If you ask me, just point blank, looking at a computer screen, I'll say heck yes. Now, how much of this running the numbers and everything do you do before actually seeing the property? Well, that's up to you. Personally, I wouldn't go through all of this on each property, but maybe when you start, put some practice in, that's okay. Once you get to the point where you can kind of look at stuff and know whether it's a deal or not, then you go check it out. If you really like it, then you go home, you run your numbers, you get all the information you need, questions that you have answered, and then you consider making an offer or not. And hopefully you have a few to work with, and you can kind of gauge which is the best deal. But if you're looking for something very specific, you might just need to pull the trigger when it pops up. I said it at the beginning of this video, I'll say it again, house hacking is the best strategy for building wealth through real estate and also living affordably, especially in markets where maybe it's a little more expensive. I love working with house hackers. I love house hacking. It's a lot to get into, but it's so worth it. If you have questions about the calculator, about the process, about anything in this video, put it in the comments down below. And if you want help finding a house hack in Raleigh, North Carolina, make sure you call the number below, or you can click the link in the description to set up a consultation link. If you want to learn about the process of me finding my own personal house hack, kind of my thoughts and processes and documenting along the way, then make sure you watch this video next. And don't forget to subscribe for more house hacking. We'll see you there.